Welcome to HortTube. My name is Putnam. In this video, we're going to take a look at a few perennials that we've added into the front garden space, give you a little bit of a patio update, show you a couple things that are looking good, and we may walk around the neighborhood and see if there's anything that's looking good. We've had a little bit of rain this week, but they've been insignificant versus, I mean, other people have had damaging things all over the country, it seems like, and we've just been rooting for a little bit of rain, but we've gotten, even right now, kind of dribble dropping a bit. I don't think it's going to be adequate unless we find a real rain at some point over this while it's unsettled. It's just dry. So as we walk, as I'm saying, we're going to walk around the neighborhood and find some things that look good. We may not. I have no idea because, again, it's been just super, super dry. One of the things about redesigning this front garden and making this piece of turf into new bed space, redefining the annuals, which have actually grown quite a bit. You can see the annual borders. You can see the plants. I mean, I think within 2 weeks or so, they'll be touching one another already. Bulb foliage needs to die back, and it has started. They're starting to decline, which is kind of nice. I'm ready for the bulb foliage to disappear at this point. But as we're redesigning this, we have holes in here, and I didn't want to just go and just buy just anything and just fill holes in. So we went back down to Big Bloomers and just grabbed a few perennial things to fill these holes. We can move them around later, but if we find some shrubs or whatever that we like over the next year, traveling or whatever, plants with stories, we'll come back in here and fill a few of these holes in the ground. But we're gonna have an open house on June 22nd and wanted to just kind of make sure that the space looked like it was kind of finished. So we've added 3 of these skyscraper purple salvia. We've got skyscraper pink that we had showed on the other side of the path over there, but these skyscraper dark purple is what this one is. Added a white lantana into this space, which won't outcompete the other flowers that Steph had designed in the annual borders. You can go back and look at the annual border video from a week or so ago if you want to know all the plants that are in annual border. And then there's some skyscraper pink salvia back here, just 3 of them. And besides that, we had only planted basically 3 shrubs and 3 kind of weeping habit, Japanese maple and a Cedrus atlantica into this space. But you can see there was still open space. But these perennials are fast growing, and they'll fill these gaps in really quickly. They're almost placeholders, and we can move them later to other places. If we find something that's just the perfect plant for this at some point, these 3 lantana can be given away or moved to another space in the garden, right? But for now, they're the perfect thing to fill that space for this summer. The Babylon Beauty, better boxwood. We put this container toward the back of the bed, and there's some red coleus or celosia, sorry, in that red foliage celosia that's about to start blooming right now with, red flowers. That should look pretty good. And then there's an Indian pinks called Little Redhead in the back of the space. That's another perennial that we're kind of missing here in the garden. But I just got these in right before this little dribble drop rain we have happening this morning. And I think, again, we're just kind of filling some holes and filling some gaps. They're almost things that were like placeholders for future plants that we would be adding out here in the garden. I think you can see Griffin frequently, if you're watching the videos from out here, if it's something in the front garden, he's usually in one of these windows looking out. He does get to come out in the garden. I think yesterday's video, there's a tiny little clip of him running around in the back garden. But again, when I'm sitting here trying to think, and he's not trying to get away, but he will expand the space we're comfortable him occupying. He'll get out of sight pretty quickly. So while we're have the camera on, but then in between, we have him out here in training, hopefully to be where we can take our eye off of him for a minute without his circle getting wider and wider and wider. Anyway, other things in these little holes on the other side, there was some another salvia, misty salvia. Steph came in and added some coneflowers in here that we did from seed, some white gomphrena that we did from seed, plugged in some lobelia back here. There's several perennials that have been added. So as this bulb foliage, again, all these daffodil foliage as it fades back. And again, I can see it starting to happen. We had a couple 90-degree days over the last week, and I can see that bulb foliage, the tulips that are back behind Steph back there, fading quickly. So I'll be excited to have that stuff kind of gone and all these perennials and annuals really taking over the space for the summertime. You know, the shrubs have their big early show in the season, and then, well, really it starts with bulbs and then shrubs. And then we have a couple of summer flowering shrubs out here, like clethra, the dogwood is going to be blooming pretty soon. We have abelia that will several abelia out here that will bloom during the summer. Of course, hydrangeas, the big leaf hydrangeas linger into summer, and then the hydrangea paniculatas will bloom during the summer. So there's summer flowering shrubs, but the vast majority of the shrubs are passing at this point, and then this becomes a perennial. You know, the perennials take over, the annuals take over, and that's where we get most of our color and our pollinators from during the summertime. But again, there's going to be holes back here, and we're just not going to rush to fill them. We'll find things that we're interested in, and then a lot of times what we'll do is we'll bring a container home, and we'll just put the container on the ground in a spot and just live with it there for a few days before we actually sink it into the ground. The Amelanchier or serviceberry does have cedar apple rust, and so some of the fruit, but not all of the fruit, you can see it on there. This is a shared disease between cedar trees and then some things in the rose family, apples. You know, it's good cedar apple rust, but it's not technically from a cedar. It's from a Juniperus virginiana, or it's a juniper that we call eastern red cedar. You know, they share a disease. There's nothing I can do about it unless I cut every cedar down, or cut every eastern red cedar down in the entire neighborhood. And I don't think that's going to work out for me. So I'm not going to do any spraying on it. I have no intention of actually eating these fruit. The tree is perfectly healthy. There is a portion of the fruit that is not on, and the birds are out here all day long. Robins are out here eating the fruit. And again, I've always said, they're always willing to take the fruit earlier than you, so these have not turned. You know, they start off red and then they turn a purplish color when they're actually mature, and they're very, very sweet. But again, they're willing to take them earlier than you are always, and I don't know how I'd protect this tree from them, even if I wanted to get the fruit to maturity. But again, I think that we're probably 50% of the fruit has cedar apple rust on it, and 50% does not. So if we look in here, there's an example of it right there, but then there's a fruit right next to it. And I think there's literally a robin in the top of the tree. You hear it? He's in the tree while I'm doing it. Is that a robin? It's hard to say. There's literally a bird above my head right now eating the fruit on the tree. So that was a great example. I think it is yep, it was a robin that came to the tree. So they're complaining that we're taking up their space right now, but they're busy eating the remaining fruit. And again, I just don't do anything about these things. I mean, there is no actual cure for this. And so if I started spraying it with something, I'd be spraying it forever. And tree's fine, no big deal. Our early fruiting blueberries are starting to form, or starting to color up now. And we're going, again, this is another thing we'll be competing with the birds on, but there's one that's ready. And I'm sure I'm competing with the birds on them. We could net these if we wanted to, but I'm not gonna worry about it. But you can see how many these actually have on them. These are southern highbush varieties. These are Southern Living Plant Collection varieties, and again, they're southern highbush. These were from, I think, University of Florida breeding. But look how early these blueberries are actually finished. I absolutely love it. And then we have a couple rabbit eye varieties that are also Southern Living Plant Collection ones, and they'll be a little bit later, so we can have blueberries over an extended period of time by having two different types out here in the garden. And both of them, the amount of chill hours we're getting during the winter, which was very, very low this winter, and I mean, it was very few hours below 45 degrees this winter for sure, but they both bloomed extremely well, and they're absolutely loaded with berries. But again, you know, I can net them to keep the birds away from them, but I'm just not going to worry about it. We'll grab the few as we go by that look ready, and the birds can have the rest. I've gotten a good start on the patio over the last few days. little bit of rain interruption here and there, and a 92-degree day interruption, which was just not fun to be out here laying these pavers when it was that hot. It's going to be a combination of, we bought this pallet of stone to put the front walkway in, which that's done. A couple of those, if you come on the open house on June 22nd, that whole front garden was nothing but roots. And when I put that front walkway in, some of them are not set quite well enough. I'll work on that in the future. I just got to take out some of those old roots out of there. This space was, again, if you followed the channel, initially we sodded this space. Last year I took out the sod, dug it out, and then put in screenings, which is just fine rock dust that will compact really well. And this has just been screenings ever since, and it's really, really compact. It's like the perfect base for laying this patio on. But I have enough stone left from the stonework out here, the paths we put in, to basically make 5 fingers of, so you can see the stone meeting the path right here in front of Steph, and then it meets the porch over here, and then it will lead you to this path right here, and then it will lead you to this path right here. And there is no path this direction, but it just looked good to have 5 basic a spider look to it, and then the empty spaces that are in between right here. Actually, we'll probably have a bird feeder back here. That's probably what we'll end up doing at the end of that particular path. I've got old bricks, lots and lots and lots of old bricks that were from various things that were here in the garden already, and these will be used to fill in these little 5 remaining gaps. And then there's going to be a brick mortared edge going around the edge of it. But I won't be teaching how to lay patio. I don't think that this is just more, I put up a line level and made sure that, it drops a little bit that way, and then it drops a little bit this way. And that's kind of all I've done. These stones are not perfect. I picked over the best ones for the front walkway. And so these are a little bit some of them are absolutely dead level, flat, and easy to put in, and then some of them are just kind of a mess. But this is what I had left, and it's it'll work out fine. And then these, I love recycling, reusing natural materials that are already in the garden. I did stonework for 20 some years. Literally the reason I quit landscaping was because of stonework, because I became famous, or not famous, but I became known for stonework, and I had less and less and less planting jobs and more stonework requests. That's why I quit landscaping, because I knew my body would not hold up to doing this. This is a project you do, and then you move on. You don't, this is really hard on someone's body to do this day in, day out. So appreciate people who do this kind of work for a living, because it is really tough on someone's body to actually do this for a living. And I did that for a while, and then was like, whoa, this is not good. Not good for me long term. Anyway, got a good start on this week. These stones basically this way are laid. These I haven't set yet, and then the brick edge will get a concrete border and then mortared in place around the edge, and then the other bricks will fill in these spaces. But I actually I did teach for a while. I had, there was a thing called the Carolina School of Gardening where I taught stonework, stone walls, masonry for a while. So I actually have done this for a long time and actually taught classes on it as well. But I don't think there's any way on a YouTube channel to really convey, how to do this. This is basically just lay a bed in place that you can compact, like, these rock screenings, which is just, again, it's just very, very fine gravel is what it is. And it will allow you to compact it down. And then you got to get in here and make sure you got to pitch one direction or another, and then you start doing it. And then if you can add a little artistry to it and mix some other materials in with it, that tends to be something that will make it stand out. A few things really taking off in the back garden. The Tamukiyama Japanese maple is happy with its move out here into a little bit more sunlight than it was back there behind it. And I got to get in here and do a little bit of pruning on it, it's now covered up the trunk entirely, which is contorted. There's a salvia in front of it that's about to be in bloom already, that, you know, amazingly. But I wanted to show off the Viburnum nudum. I think this is as close to peak flower as I probably will be able to film it this season. Bumblebees all over this thing in the afternoon. It's fun when you have a native plant like this, because then instead of seeing, you know, all the honeybees, which are fine, I mean, but they're just not native. With this, when the flowers are open on it, we're shooting this early in the morning, so the bumblebees aren't out, and it's raining a little bit. But the bumblebees will be on it all afternoon. Interesting moths, all kinds of interesting native species that enjoy having these native plants in flower in the garden. And this thing's just absolutely perfect. What a great plant Viburnum nudum is in a small lot. This is a large growing shrub, but it plays nice in our small lot because it, you know, has this upright kind of vase habit to it. So it's not eating up a giant footprint down here on the ground. It's doing, you know, it's doing its thing up higher. Here's a bumble. Yep, maybe it's going to land on here. I don't know, but they are awake now. But it's kind of fun to watch this plant during the afternoon. There's a cicada, I think, on the back of it right there. So here's one of the cicadas that's come out and done its thing already. You know, they leave these things behind. We could hear a bunch of them yesterday. They're definitely not as bad here as, you know, other places in the country, that's for sure. But we are seeing them out here in the garden. Interesting spot on the back path. We have this is an Acanthus that we were actually about to give up on, or at least give up on in this space. It took 2 years. It did absolutely nothing. It just sat here and struggled. Not a single indication that it would ever flower. And now look at it, it's coming into flower now, and it's just, man, it's just, the leaves look, the foliage looks incredible. The flowers look incredible. This plant will eat you in a lot, get you in a lot of different ways. The flowers actually have a little thorn on the back of them that's prickly. Holly, are you in the middle of shrubs? You're just standing in the middle of the shrubs. But anyway, it looked like it was going to, now you're walking to the ajuga. That is not it. Holly, that's not it. Okay. But this year it's just come out like crazy, and it's coming into full flower. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 flower spikes on it so far, and just growing like crazy. But it is eating a little honey oak leaf hydrangea that's down below it, and a couple of hosta that are down below it. That little honey oak leaf hydrangea, I've been asked about how it's doing a couple times. It actually initially got eaten by a deer, like to the ground. And so it's had to come back from that. And I may have broken it one time. I think when it was coming back, you know, when these plants are only 4 inches tall, coming back from other damage, it's easy to step on them. So anyway, it's got to be rescued. We've got some space back here on the back trail now that we can move it to, and a couple hosta that are being buried. But this Acanthus is now happy, doesn't need to be moved, but the things around it, unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, you're fortunate when this happens, right? When everything's thriving so much that it's starting to compete with one another, you know, to one of them's demise potentially. That's a good thing. We'll just rescue the one, find a new home for it, because we've got some spaces out here, and glad to see the Acanthus blooming. Almost forgot, before we went out exploring, we did put in another purple daydream Loropetalum on the edge area, just up from where we just looked at those blueberries a minute ago. And then Steph planted a couple different profusion zinnias over here. Again, bulb foliage is in the process of dying back, but she planted two groups of these. I think it's profusion cherry bicolor, or cherry bicolor and profusion white zinnias. These zinnias just perform so well, and they don't get mildew. They're this compact. They just bloom all summer long. I love giant zinnias as well, but when these little ones that stay compact like this, that are mildew resistant, are just so good. And then there was another one of these clean sweep snowbank Indian hawthorns added to the edge as well. The foliage on this thing is just incredibly clean. White flowering dwarf Indian hawthorn. super compact, as you can see, and then perfect, incredibly clean foliage. It'll get a purple berry in the place of those white flowers in the fall if you don't do any pruning on it during the season. Typically don't have to do any pruning on them because they're just extremely low maintenance, but it's nice to see these really disease resistant Indian hawthorns being kind of re-released out into the world, because we've just had some of the older varieties just got leaf spot issues and then started, defoliating and just don't look all that great. And so we've just seen less and less of them being used. But I think this is definitely will offer a return to this just being such great ornamental plants. This purple riding hood penstemon is definitely worth pointing out. The flowers are a little past peak, but that color with that agave combined together is just spectacular. It's got a few more flowers coming on that penstemon, but it's an early flowering penstemon. Hit the ground running, gotten itself into flower, and against those two colors together just looks so striking. We took out our royal purple smoke tree in a video several weeks ago. This is our immediate next door neighbor's royal purple smoke tree coming into flower. This is where it has enough sun that it's not leaning out trying to stretch for light. And you can see how perfect the tree is. It's been limbed up into a small tree over time. Sometimes you'll see them, with foliage all the way to the ground. This one though has been just allowed to become a small tree in the front garden. And it's amazing because only 40 feet away ours was in too much shade, and it was stretching and leaning and never flowered. And then you literally walk 40 feet and here's an absolutely perfect specimen of royal purple smoke tree. Walk another 40 feet and here's one in the shade. So that you can see the difference. The two that were in the shade look like this. The one that's in the full sun looks like the one we just showed. We have several neighbors in the neighborhood that use star jasmine as a screening plant. So they've got this, fence in place with the lattice, and then, the star jasmine will go through. There's evergreen, but here it is in peak flower. You tend to get this full flower thing in May. It's a little early probably. It's usually more toward mid to late May when they come into full flower like this. And then you'll get some residual flowers on it after this, but it's mainly, just this peak flower right now. Nothing smells quite like the star jasmine. But great evergreen vine. Here we're on the edge of where these can be damaged in a particularly bad winter, so it's good to have them in slightly protected space, out of the full wind. I wouldn't use it as a screening plant, as a wind screen as well if you're in zone 7B or 8A, because they can be damaged in the winter. Here's another example of star jasmine being used as a screen. It's under a very large oak here. It's thrived. It took about 3 years for this to actually fill in and cover. It was sparse, got damaged I think one winter, so this may be 4 or 5 years in the making, but now it's completely covered. In fact, it'll probably have to be cut on at some point this year to it'll try to stretch up in different directions. But here it is in peak flower, and then when it's done flowering, it's just these nice shiny leaves, and it's a screen that's only a foot wide, right? Most of our screening plants are going to be eat up a lot of ground space, but here with just a basic metal fence. This is actually just a roll of like a farm fencing with metal post in it. So it's not even a fancy fence. You can't see it anymore. So there's star jasmine as a screen. A lot of perennials have jumped out super early. The Rudbeckia here is on full flower in front of this fence. Got cone flowers that are showing tons of color already. Not unusual for them to be about this tall, but definitely a little unusual for them to be this far into flower. And then the milkweed is already showing some color. We've got one that's budded up in our garden. There's a coneflower coming up through it, but this is tuberosa is this species. That's it coming into full flower. Again, a little bit early, but looks beautiful out here. Lots of great oak leaf hydrangeas all over the neighborhood, but this is the only one I've seen that's absolutely in full flower. Again, seems a little early to be in full flower, but we'll take it. It's elementary school here in the neighborhood. Great 4-season plants, great natives. You got the inflorescences out on the outside that are just, the decorative part of the flower, but you can look in the interior here and see where all the real flower action is. And of course, all of our native pollinators will be all over these as the day goes on. Came over to my friend Rob's garden that we've shown off many times. This is a fantastic garden. Something's always going on here. The color guard yucca out by the street has a flower spike on it. The flowers are just about to start opening. They will just draw in pollinators from everywhere. Honeybees will be all over those as soon as those flowers are open. You can see how beautiful. This thing would never have to flower, but it does. It occasionally, put a flower spike up like that. Amazing, beautiful. He's got 2 of the Golden Falls redbuds out here. He bought them a little bit shorter, and I've talked about this before. This tree is going to be whatever height you buy it at, or whatever height you're willing to put work into it, right? So his were here, and he has been staking up a piece a little bit higher and a little bit higher. So you got to stake up. If you have to stake up to the height that you want them, and that's the only way you're going to get any height out of them. But he's actually he's been able to gain a foot or more out of them since he bought them, because they were tiny things initially. I hated to break that news to him that they weren't going to get taller without him putting work into them, but he's put the work into it, and now they're taller. He's got a Tradescantia invasion. This is one of those plants that can just kind of keep on giving. We have it coming up just everywhere in our garden, but you can see the bee is working it. Right now. We've got a trash truck coming, so we'll take a break. This Tradescantia is just very, very, very good at making seed and just coming up everywhere. And when you try to pull it, it just breaks off at the ground and just comes right back. So it really has to be dug out in order to actually get it out. But he's got azaleas that have passed flowering, but you see the yucca's about to flower. Here's a hydrangea paniculata that will flower later in the summer. There's actually some salvia coming up through the middle of it. Just always something going on out here. A lot of winter flowering interest things. There's a lot of camellias out here that are flowering. One of the more interesting things that's flowering or about to flower is this cardoon. This is kind of an interesting one to shoot, because back in, I don't know when it was, February or sometime, we were at the Ralston and we shot a video with Mark Wethington just on some things that might be interesting in the garden at that time of year. And the cardoon at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum was about this tall. They had it planted with some agave. So again, that combo we had over at the garden with the purple flowers and the agave, that was kind of a blue on blue on blue bed that they had going. But we saw them at the Ralston last weekend, and they were starting to pop up like this. As soon as it gets hot, they'll flower. It's an artichoke family member, so it actually looks like, if you're looking at this flower, you got to be, it looks like an artichoke, right? And artichokes have to be harvested before the flowers actually open on them. But you can see this is an artichoke family member. Beautiful, beautiful plant. It's so striking in the garden. This beautiful blue, and it's a winter flower. It's basically a cold season perennial. So this thing will actually flower and then go dormant for the summertime, and it'll start coming back up in the late fall and into the winter. And then as it starts to get hot in the late spring, it bolts like this, flowers, and it repeats that process. We'll finish this video up with the Flamethrower redbud. You can see all the different colors. It's changing. All the newest leaves are always on this purple shade of purple, and then it comes back and turns. It basically is unveiling the chartreuse leaves that are behind it, and then those over the course of the summer will become slightly greener. But it's always showing this kind of 3 colors throughout the plant. We get so many redbud questions, A lot of these new redbuds are a bit fragile, and you can even see it in this plant, how much growth this thing's actually put on. And the trunk is only this big around. And the limbs are only this big around, these big branches, and then these leaves are this big. It's definitely gonna leave it in a position where it could be damaged. It could be damaged by ice, could be damaged by wind. We've seen it on a bunch of these newer redbud cultivars out in the world that, they break apart. So we probably would do a little bit of pruning on this, while it's still small, just to try to thicken this thing up a bit. And so it can kind of withstand, you can see how wispy it actually is. But beautiful, beautiful tree. Can't take anything away from it, how beautiful this thing is. It's in a little bit of shade to the point, you know, redbuds like that kind of part shade conditions. This one might be tucked up under it so much that it doesn't have quite as much of the color as that we see in other ones. So I think if it was maybe 10 or 15 feet that way toward the sun, just a little bit more, it would be a bit more colorful right now. But there you go, Flamethrower redbud. So there's a view of a few things around the neighborhood, and a few things back at the garden, and the patio is well underway, and we'll be inviting people into the garden on June 22nd. So make sure you're watching the question and answer videos on Sunday for more details about that.